So what happens if you don't have reflex testing? Well, let's say you want to minimize the number of lab tests, and this has happened. We got somebody who's got a prolonged PTT of 65 seconds. She needs minor surgery. So she takes a day off work, comes in. Visit 1, 65 seconds. Comes in the next time. She's driven back home now, right? So now, even if we turn it around in an hour, she's back on Route 95 driving back up to Portland, Maine, right? So then we say, ooh, it's prolonged. Come back, take another day off work, you busy executive, and we'll do a mixing study. And then she does that, and then, okay, get the answer back in another hour or two, drive back to Portland. She's still waiting for this minor surgery, right? And then on her third visit, we do the factor assays and find out she's factor 11 deficient, and she only had to take 3 days off of work to get 6 tests done. Well, that's ridiculous, right? In real life, that's ridiculous. So what can we do? Remember, we don't want to miss anything, right? We can do all the tests at once. Show up, 65 seconds. We're going to do everything for prolonged PTT. What would that involve? Boy, wouldn't you love to have this every time somebody had a prolonged PTT? Let's see, we're going to do a mixing study, 8, 9, 11, and 12 assays, loop anticoagulant, screening and confirmatory assay, and for all of those of you who know coag, the worst test to do in the clinical lab in terms of effort, the Bethesda unit assay for a factor 8 with every prolonged PTT, so we don't miss any. That's ridiculous, too. So the answer is to sort between factor deficiency, lupus anticoagulant, and a potentially lethal bleeding disorder from an 8 inhibitor. You get 1 visit and you do 9 tests, most of which are useless. You need reflex testing. And you know, it's not hard to get the reflex testing. You can just design them yourselves. These are just some in coag, lupus anticoagulant, protein C, anthramin. Here's the prolonged PTT, removal of heparin, initial test for PTT with removal of heparin. Then we do a mixing study. The result of the mixing study is the criteria for reflexing. So there they all are. And we have now, and we are building more of these at Vanderbilt. We built more than 100 at the Mass General. And so what has to happen is you have to go before the medical policy committee, somebody in the institution, and say, here's your choices. See this big test menu? You people can pick from this big test menu. Or we'll put in algorithms. Which would you like, right? So nobody has ever said, we don't want the algorithms. Everybody just said, please put the reflex testing in. I've never had one that was turned away. So we had a very interesting experience, which is going to lead me to the other side of this. Help them pick the right test. And remember, the other side is help them understand what to do with the results. In Boston, there was a laboratory that came to us and said, we're a small laboratory. We can't do all the sophisticated tests. Will you do the coagulation tests for us? So we did this special coagulation test. And what happened is that laboratory did not want to allow reflex testing. They thought it would be confused with panel testing. Panel testing has problems in terms of legality, so they said, we're going to make them pick all the tests from a big list. So what happened is we started monitoring the number of mistakes they made in test ordering. Look at this. About 40% of the requisitions for a hypercoag panel, that's what we were counting, came in with 4 errors. Ooh, factor 5 instead of factor 5 Leiden, left this test out, put that test on. Nobody knew what they were doing. But you know what we were also doing is providing reflex testing for the others, but we did an interpretation. And in the interpretation, we said, this is the wrong test, order this one. Look what happened to the number of errors per requisition. None, 1, 2, 3, 4, after they read the interps. So people learn, just like they'd learn in anatomic path and radiology, when you give them a paragraph that is patient-specific. So that's the second strategy, the back end. You need to provide a patient-specific narrative, like they do in AP and radiology. Now let me tell you what they don't do in anatomic pathology. They don't take that breast biopsy, go over to the textbook in anatomic pathology and say, where's that paragraph on ductal breast carcinoma? And say, okay, we're just going to put that in. That canned comment, it goes in the same all the time. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter if this is an aggressive tumor with lymph nodes, we're putting in those 6 sentences as the interpretation. And people in anatomic pathology would say, how ridiculous is that? Well, guess what? That's what people do in our business. They take that same 7 sentences about factor 5 Leiden and they attach it to somebody who's 24 years old or got a clot, or a 96-year-old lady who just had a stroke. Now, how ridiculous is that? So we have to understand that we have to read the notes, just like it's done in anatomic pathology and radiology. And we have to provide a patient-specific narrative. And it has to be in things other than the field that we started in. Our flagship was coagulation, but sorting out that positive ANA, the strange hemoglobin, These have been done for a long time in a lot of laboratories with interpretations, but now you've got to add more value. If you just say band seen in the hemoglobin S region, thank you very much. That's not value added. Tell me the rest of the story, right? So HIV, we were stunned to find out how many people who get that ELISA positive one that's not confirmed by Western blot think that the patient has AIDS. And you say, wait a minute, you know, there's this false positivity and you have to confirm it. It's amazing. And by doing the interpretation just on the ELISA positive samples, we were able to tell the doctor something they didn't know about a Western blot. That's completely stunning to me. Hepatitis, toxicology, there are certain areas that haven't been approached yet. So I'm just telling you, again, here is the result, this is the canned comment, and this is the patient-specific interpretation in terms of value. And that's where we have to get to. Now, I've given this talk and promoted this concept for a long time. And I've had a lot of people come up to me afterwards and say, guess what, we do the interps. And I said, really? Show me what you do and tell me how you do it. So here's what I've heard. One is the canned comment. Another one is we do it if we get a call. So a lot of people say, I do interpretations all day, but only when they call me. You know what? If you actually took a glass slide out of the histology lab and you gave it to surgeons and said, you can make $200 if you actually read this yourself, a whole bunch of them are going to try to do it. You know? So the fact is that's what's going on, and you have to understand that you can't sit around and wait till there's a question, because some surgeon's going to think he or she got it exactly right. That looks really malignant to me. It's going away. And it may not be malignant at all. So I think that the concept of waiting for a question to do an interp is silly, and you can't do it just for every PT and PTT. You have to go up at least one notch in complexity. And here's the other thing. Yeah, I do it. Who does it when you're not at home? Well, nobody. Well, that's great. So we're doing frozen sections in anatomic pathology, so you can decide how much surgery to do. But when that person goes away, that's not there. So just keep hacking away. So we have to understand, we have to support the clinical lab services. You need 2 people to do the interpretation in coag. You need maybe a team of people who might be involved in coagulation in the clinical laboratory as part of that team to provide advice. So what happens really is that the doctors are guessing. Boy, I tell you, if the public really had a sense of this, right? If we took half the city of Philadelphia and put them in here, right? They said, is that really happening? Oh, yeah. I mean, I saw the clinical laboratory in 1972. I did a residency, 26 years ago, right? This is what's happening. So they guess, they're guessing about all of us. I go to my primary care doctor, he actually says, what should I do with all your lab test results? So, you know, most people are just going to be the victims of whatever the doctor doesn't know. So which knowledgeable in the clinical laboratory is going to step forward? Who is going to be the person? And, you know, this exciting development of the people who are MTs, who are going to go on to be the DCLS, which you probably know about, the Doctorate in Clinical Laboratory Science. These people can be major contributors in the clinical laboratory. Imagine spending your whole year in this career, all in a clinical laboratory, and then without leaving it to do a PhD on calcium metabolism, you can get a doctoral level degree and then be the leader and, in fact, be much closer to the patient with regard to this consultative activity. I think that's an exciting development.